I'm with Troy Miller from the NRB, National Religious Broadcasters. Now, Troy, what is the NRB?
So, the National Religious Broadcasters Association is a membership organization made up of almost 1,600 Christian communicators that work in the fields of radio, television, Christian film, Christian publishing, podcasters, bloggers, and churches. So, if you're in Christian communications, NRB is here to defend your First Amendment rights here in the U.S. and freedom of religion rights around the world. That's kind of the primary work we do. And then we hold a large annual conference every year that helps ministries get together, and it's kind of an iron sharpens iron, and we talk about the latest issues in technology. We bring in the best speakers, so that happens each year to help ministries grow in whatever God's called them to do.
When were you started and why were you started?
Actually, we just celebrated a few weeks ago our 80th anniversary. We were started back in 1944 when radio was the emerging medium. There was a group of pastors that decided radio was a great way to reach people for the gospel and also to disciple people. And so they started with radio programs. Well, there was a group that decided that they wanted to make the decision who should be and who shouldn't be on radio. And in order to counter that group, the NRB was formed at Moody Church in Chicago in 1944. And again, we've been fighting for the free speech rights of any kind of Christian communicators around the world to be in the public space where God's called them to be.
So, what sort of people are members of the NRB?
So we have everybody from large radio groups like Salem Radio here in the U.S., Bot Radio, Trans World Radio that has radio stations around the world, Far East Broadcasting, and then large television groups. And like I said, Christian publishers, authors. Today, our fastest growing groups are, of course, Christian podcasters, folks that want to podcast and get their message out on the various social media platforms or over the digital airwaves.
Imagine technology is changing so much, you have to change with the technology as well.
Oh, that's absolutely right. My background is actually a technology guy. I spent 11 years in the computer industry, and we've seen so much technology change, especially over the last 2 decades, going from analog to digital. And then, of course, on TV, we've gone from HD to 4K to 8K. And we're just seeing a lot of change with traditional broadcasting and the new digital frontier. So there are a lot of changes, and we bring in a lot of experts in our conference every year to just talk about where technology is going and technology trends.
Now, you equip broadcasters. How do you do that?
So a couple of different ways. One, we help them keep up on the latest technology. We also have experts that they can call. We'll connect them with engineers from other people within the association so they can talk about what the latest changes are and moves. We also help them with other things they need. Fundraising, back office advice in accounting, HR services. We have partners in all of those areas that can help a ministry with all the administrative things they need to do, as well as whatever they've been called to do in ministry.
And you also do advocacy work. What sort of things are you doing there?
Yeah, so advocacy is a large part of what we do throughout the whole year. And we really work in what we think is 4 major areas. Of course, we work in what's going on in the government. So we work with any laws that are being proposed coming through the Congress, through legislation. The regulatory environment today is an environment that's ever changing. So we work with the Federal Communications Commission to make sure that there are regulations and rules that aren't going to be burdensome on broadcasters. We also watch for regulations and rules that have to do with program producers. So that's a big area that we work with today. Those 2 areas we work. Fortunately, sometimes that doesn't work, and we have to work in the legal landscape. We currently have a couple of lawsuits underway, one actually against the Federal Communications Commission on a new EEO form. This is an employment form that they want all broadcasters to fill out. That form has been blocked several times by the courts as both being burdensome and intrusive. So we're taking them to court on that. And we're also taking the Internal Revenue Service to court on what's called the Johnson Amendment, a law that silences the leaders of nonprofit organizations from talking about candidates. So that's one area. The other area we work in now today, a lot more, is corporate America. We're starting to work more in the C-suites, in the executive suites across corporate America, because corporate America has seen a lot more activism, and it's seen a lot of anti-Christian and just plain anti-religious activism as well. out there. So we're trying to build bridges to the corporate C rooms and to educate them on really who the audiences are out there. They're only hearing kind of one side of the story. And so we're trying to counter that. And then the mainstream media is another big area we work with. The mainstream media is often very hostile to religious people in this world and around the world. And so that's another area in the U.S. here. And the last area, the fourth area we work in on advocacy is international religious persecution. We work when we can with the State Department and various entities to address international religious persecution around the world.
Now you've got an election coming up very, very soon. As a Christian broadcaster, does it matter who wins the election?
Well, it always matters as broadcasters, as business people, the type of people that are going to govern and the type of governance they're going to employ. And some governance, the current administration is regulatory heavy-handed. So we look at that kind of things that's going on. And then we look at an administration that may be more business friendly and more certainly more religious friendly. So yeah, it certainly matters who governs this country. As a 501c3, as I said earlier, we don't endorse or oppose candidates, but we do bring up and talk about the issues that are important to our membership and the Christian community as a whole.
I think encouraging Christian communicators is very important.
Oh, it's very important. Look, we live in, I think, maybe what might we call the peak of the communications age, where you can communicate around the world instantly today with multiple people. So communications has never been stronger. There were recent surveys that say the average person now spends more time online, about 9 hours, than they do sleeping. And so that's really crazy. So Christian communications, broadcasting is important. Radio is actually growing here in the U.S. So the radio audience is continuing to grow. And of course, the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that are on the internet today listening to influencers. So it's a great time to be a Christian communicator, and it's also an important time to be a communicator because there's certainly a lot of anti-messages out there.
Now, here in Israel, Israel, of course, was hit by a massive terrorist attack just under a year ago on October the 7th. Did you come to visit Israel at all in solidarity and support of Israel?
Yes, I've actually been to Israel twice. We came in December, so just barely 2 months after the incident on October 7th to show a show of solidarity. We visited some of the communities to the south along the Gaza border that were hit the hardest. We were able to talk to community leaders and to people and let them know that the Christian community across the U.S. is the community that's standing the strongest with Israel, and that we are praying for them every day, praying that they can rebuild their communities, and of course, praying for their continued safety. So that was our December trip. We met with a number of religious and governmental leaders on that trip as well. And then NRB hosted a solidarity trip that I went on in May in association with the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. And again, we brought a group of Christian leaders. These are all Christian communicators. One of the folks we brought with us did an entire documentary on that. And again, we visited some of the cities in the South. We also visited the Nova Music Festival grounds, which was very surreal, very touching, hard to do and to hear those stories. And then again, met with a number of religious and government leaders to let them know that the Christian community is strongly standing in support of Israel's right to defend herself, and also standing in support of Israel, helping Israel to recover from this.
What were your thoughts as you were going around seeing some of these places where this terrible terrorist attack took place?
Just horrific. I'm a Navy veteran, so I've been in a lot of places around the world and spent time in the Persian Gulf. But this was just beyond thinkable, especially when we went to Be'er and talked to the things that went on in that community, to talk to survivors who had to hear and hide in their house. And there was one man who heard his elderly neighbor, pleading in Arabic for his life, only to be murdered in his front yard. And then to go to the Nova Film Festival where all these young adults, all these kids to me were just, they were out having a good time. They never thought they would wake up that morning and it would impact them for the rest of their lives. And the brutality, I think if I could tell people one thing that they have to understand, that the brutality here, this was not an act of normal warfare. This was an act of pure evil that was perpetrated on the Jewish people that day. And that, I think, will live with me forever.
I think this is a spiritual battle, what's happening in here in Israel at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. This is definitely a spiritual battle. This is a dynamic behind this. The dynamic powers behind this are just crazy. I don't know how you could do that much evil and not understand this is a spiritual battle. Not only is it a spiritual battle for the land of Israel and for the Jewish people, but I think it's a spiritual battle just to silence the Judeo-Christian message around the world. I think we know that these radical Islamic terrorists, these people, once they silence Israel, the next thing they want to silence is the U.S., the big Satan, and we know behind that is the church, and it's the Christian church message. It's the message of hope of the gospel that they just can't stand, and Satan can't stand that. So there is, and that's why we've called Christians to be praying across this country, because this is at its root a spiritual battle.
Has it surprised you how the students have reacted in the protests and just the rise in
Somewhat.
anti-Semitism as well?
Well, somewhat it was surprising. And I think what was the most surprising was how fervent and how deep it went. But look, in the U.S. here, we've had a huge problem in our higher institutions of learning. And I think what this did was really expose something that's been there all along, especially if you look at the U.S. and understand that the Jewish community in the U.S. By far is secular, not religious. They are far more left-leaning and progressive. And so to understand that these students and people here, supported a lot of these left progressive causes, and now with the attack on Israel, which is crazy, they get attacked by Hamas, and then all of a sudden these protesters come out. But this is a part of the whole critical race theory and critical theory that's been taught in these higher educations now is coming back to really haunt them, because they really boil down everything into just two categories. There's the oppressed and the oppressors, and that's it. It's not even good and evil. It's oppressed and oppressors. They erase the fact there is such thing as a real good and real evil. And so they have bought into the propaganda, often pushed and paid for by these radical Islamic groups. They brought into the propaganda that somehow Israel is the oppressor and the Palestinian people, the people that live in Gaza, are the oppressed. And that's all that matters. And then out of that, you've seen this rampant anti-Semitism. And here's another problem that's out there too. On these college campuses, they're not just protesting against the actions of a government, the actions of, let's say, the Israeli government. They're actually protesting against Jewish people simply because they're Jewish. When you block Jewish professors from going to teach their class, when you block Jewish students from going to teach their class, these are American citizens, not Israeli citizens. That shows that your issue is not about the policies of a government. Your issues are about the heritage of a people group. And so I think we've just seen that get exposed on these college campuses here with this war that's going on.
You got the chance and opportunity to meet with Israeli leaders. I imagine they're very appreciative that you came, but also came to support them.
Oh, yeah. That was a message we heard over and over again from both leaders, political leaders, governmental leaders, leaders in various cities that we met in, and religious leaders, even within the Jewish Orthodox community. I can tell you the story. We actually, when we were there in December, we were there the last night of Hanukkah. And so we had the privilege to be invited in by a rabbi to celebrate dinner with him and a meal with him and his wife on the last night of Hanukkah. And he let us know that both he and his wife are Reformed rabbis, which are the more left progressive rabbis. Both of them are professors at the Jerusalem University. And he said, we are probably on the wrong side of most cultural social issues than you are as evangelical conservative Christians. But yet here you are, evangelical conservative Christians, in my home, sharing a meal, telling me how much you love me, you're praying for me, you support me. And my left liberal counterparts in the US are condemning me and condemning my actions. And he said that you don't know the profound impact that has had on my life.
Tell us a bit about the NRB convention.
So the NRB convention, I said we hold an annual convention of Christian communicators. It's actually an international convention. We have representatives from all around the world that come. It'll be in February 24th through the 27th in Grapevine, Texas, at the Texas Gaylord Hotel. It'll bring over 5,000 Christian communicators together to, again, share ideas, to be able to hear what the latest trends are in technology. We'll have a number of sessions talking about artificial intelligence and how it relates to communications and to broadcasting. They'll also hear from key leaders and experts on a number of social issues that are going on, as well as all of the legal or legislative issues. So it's just a great group. And at the same time, it's also a time for spiritual sharpening. So we get together. One of my favorite things to see at NRB is when you walk the halls and you see groups of individuals praying for one another, especially when there are people from around the world, from different cultures and from different backgrounds, and even people, if you can imagine, from different denominations within the Christian churches here in the U.S. actually praying for one another. And that's just one of the highlights of the NRB convention.
Why do you do what you do?
It's interesting you asked me that question, because I was thinking about that on my drive in this morning. And I think why we do what we do is because it is important for Christian communicators to be able to get their message out. It is important to get the hope of the gospel out to this world. We live in a world today that is so fractured and is so much full of despair and depression. You just hear it all the time. People are lost. They're drifting today. The world has no hope for them and offers no peace for them. And so when the Christian communicators are there and they're on the radio or television or they're on social media platforms, and just the stories of people that their lives have been changed because they turned the radio dial or they turned the television or they clicked on a link and there was somebody giving them the message of hope, a message of deliverance, a message that their heart was longing for. And so to be able to be called by God to be part of an organization whose job is to protect that right, is to protect the right of all of these different ministries, whether they're called to be evangelism or they're called to be apologetics or they're called to address social issues, whatever God has called them to do, we work to keep them in the public sector to be able to do that. And that is just, to me, so enriching and so fulfilling, and at the same time, so humbling.
What is your prayer for Christian broadcasters all around the world today?
So my prayer is don't despair, don't lose heart. We know there's a lot of opposition today around the world, and especially we talk about it here in the U.S., but look, right now we have one of the most hostile environments around the world. Whether you're in India or Asia or Africa today, there are a lot of Christians who are very concerned whether they're even going to be able to keep their broadcast license or keep their stations on the air. But remember, we know how this ends. We have a God who is all powerful. He is seated on the throne. Nothing gets past him and nothing is beyond his ability. So stay steadfast, persevere, and continue to preach the gospel and do what God has called you to do. For God is there with us, as Jesus promised. Lo, I am with you always.
Amen. Well, Troy, thank you very much for sharing today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on today. I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing.